So I've been using the same plugin to slightly stereonize my basslines, which I really like as an effect on my bassline. But the other day I found out through this comment that it may have a little bit of a problem. So today we're going to dive into this plugin and see what is actually happening. So as you can imagine, MStereoSpread is a plugin that I love. I use it all the time, and I use it also in particular to stereonize my bassline. In this case, that was actually done in the production, so you're not going to see that in the mixing session over here. But if I open up something with a stereo analyzer, we can see that the bassline is still stereo. And I've always taken, at least what I assumed was, great care in making sure that my low end was still mono. The reason for this is because I personally believe that a mono low end is sounding more powerful. I know that it also has to do with the system that you're playing it on, and there's a lot of discussion between people who say it like, okay, but most festival systems nowadays are stereo, and then other people who correctly point out that that might be the case, but only for the mid frequencies and the high frequencies, not for the low frequencies, which are still normally reproduced by mono subs. But all of that discussion can be put at the wayside of the technical side because I just like the sound of mono bass with a slight bit of extra stereo at about, say, 250 Hz and everything above. So for the longest time, the way that I would dial it in is I would go into my bassline, get myself my stereo spread, and then just set this to the frequency which I wanted to be the minimum frequency that would be stereonized, assuming that everything below that would be maintained as mono, or at least fairly close to mono. So I always thought, okay, I'm just going to be able to put this on here, set my mono frequency, and that is going to be fine. Of course, I knew that filters had a little bit of a margin of error. In fact, if you look at the filter, if we go just in here and we add a low pass filter, what you're going to see is that because this is the frequency, that doesn't mean that over here there's going to be sound and over here there's not going to be sound. So I knew that this property of filters existed. I also know that you can change this property by the steepness. You can make it steeper for its effect to be stronger and stronger, and therefore for it to roll off quicker to the left side of the filter cutoff. But what I didn't expect was that that wasn't quite the case. Hey, does this ever happen to you? Then maybe you also recognize this. Fear not, I have the solution for you from today's sponsor, dbdone. Because dbdone is an amazing project organization and statistics tool which allows you to keep all your productions under control and organized. Use the tag system to classify projects or organize them in stacks to group them. Keep track of project status with customizable project state. Quickly add files to projects, include notes, add tasks, or even share productions with others. All of that should be enough to keep you in control of your productions and on top of your game. So if any of that interests you, make sure to check out the link in the description to start using it for free. And if you're considering upgrading to a full version, make sure to use the code projector30 so that I get a little bit of a kickback from your purchase. So thank you dbdone for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into it. So I'm actually going to switch over to Ableton for this one. I know that for the last month we've been mainly talking about Reaper because I want to keep it in the mixing context. But giving you the example inside of Ableton is going to be a little bit easier. Nice, it's almost like coming home, isn't it? After a while of Reaper, just getting back into your main DAW. So what I've quickly done is I've created an oscillator over here, which is going to give us a little bit of 50 Hz. I am going to put a utility behind it so that we don't have to listen to it all the time. And I'm going to turn it up again. Let's get it to a nice minus 12 dB. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the plugin that we're testing. So MStereoSpread over here. We can already see that it's currently panning the sine wave to the right here with the way that this graph works. Let's verify that with an external graph as well, so we know that this graph is correct, which we're going to put over here. We see that these two graphs match. And what we'll also see is that the minimum frequency is already set to the frequency of our oscillator. Again, 50 Hz over here. So let's see how far we have to turn this up to get through mono. Okay. Oh, it's still affecting 50 Hz here. It still seems to be doing something. I mean, it's now panned slightly to the left. Still there. Almost. Yeah. I mean, it's still registering as having side information here at minus 55.1 dB. I don't think that that counts. But this frequency has to be really, really high to make sure that there isn't any stereo information at that frequency going on. And as you can see right now, I have it set to roughly 3 times the frequency, a little bit more than 3 times the frequency. And honestly, looking at the graph, this is where the shock really came, because I didn't realize that a setting like this would still stereonize such a low frequency sound in this drastic of a way. As you can see also from this graph over here, we're still getting a decently loud side volume over here. And we can also see that this is far away from just being mono, being at 0%. So we're definitely still getting stereo information from this. Another test that we can do is by setting the minimum frequency all the way down. So just emulating the full range of frequencies that this can affect. And what I'm then going to do is I'm going to add an equalizer. And I'm actually just going to EQ out the side signal by just high passing this. So we're going to give ourselves a high pass. I'm going to set it to mid-side mode. This to the side. And then of course I want this before the stereoscope so we can actually see what is going on here. Put this over here and the equalizer, I'll make that as small as possible. And now we're slowly going to turn up this frequency while we're keeping a look at the graph again. And what you'll notice is that it rolls off much, much quicker in this version with this high pass, with this 12 dB per octave high pass, than it would do with the actual minimum frequency setting over here. Of course, another option would be to go with the multiband approach. We saw this plugin before with MStereoSpread. So we're gonna have MStereoSpread here, and what we can do is we can just load up the band here and just set the lowest band to mono. As you can see, even at 200 Hz, this is going to fully mono this. You can see we get an even lower percentage than we got with the filter. And this has to do with the fact that what is probably happening over here is that this is using 24 dB per octave crossover filters, which are twice as steep as the filter that we saw before. So this is kind of the expected result. Now, what does that mean for this particular plugin that we've been analyzing? What does it mean for this functionality over here? Honestly, I still use it. I still like it. I still use it to dial in the tonality of the sound. When I mean the tonality of the sound, what is really important with this particular stereoizer is the amount of bands that you set up, as well as the kind of spread that those bands have over the frequency spectrum. And that, of course, is determined by the minimum and maximum frequency. But now, of course, knowing that the minimum frequency isn't actually really cutting any of the stereo information from those frequencies, that does mean that I have to be more careful with that, and I have to use other tools to potentially fix that. Honestly, the reason why it took me so long to figure this out is because it is not something that you're really going to hear. In fact, I'm doubtful that any of the effects that we talked about today is something that you would actually notice. The reason why I like talking about this stuff and why I think it is important is because this comes down to just fundamentally understanding the tools that you're working with. And personally, I think that knowing what you're doing with the tools that you're working with and actually knowing what they're doing to the audio is a much better approach than throwing it on there and saying like, oh, as long as it sounds good, it's going to be okay. Because it can be true that indeed this causes a problem or it doesn't cause a problem. But the fact of the matter is that I wouldn't have found that out if I just had used it the way that I was using it, which was, oh, I like the sound of this stereoizer and I'm just going to assume that the parameters do what they say they do. So really, that is what I wanted to boil this video down to. It's just another reason for you to start learning the tools that you're using. Of course, if you haven't already done that, I know that there's a large percentage of my audience that just reads every manual as soon as they buy a plugin. Like, I know that I am a very technical YouTuber with this kind of stuff and I have a very technical approach, but I do think that that has in and of itself a valuable benefit in the sense that you get to know your tools more and you just get to naturally understand the processes that you're using to make music better than if you were just to think of it in terms of like, oh, this is the sound I like, or oh, I'm just gonna throw it on there and experiment and see what it does. So really, that is the main reason why I wanted to make this video, not something in particular with this plugin. I just wanted to show that sometimes a plugin behaves differently than what it says on the label. So you sometimes just need to make sure that you actually know what the plugin is doing. What you also need to make sure of is that you like the video and that you're subscribed to the channel if you enjoy this kind of content, because we are at the end of the video for now. Another way to support the channel is to do so financially, which you can do so by becoming a Patreon or a YouTube member. So thank you if you choose to do that, and thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.